I named the Secretary of Defense to a black man. And so it's all about treating people with dignity.
So Joe Biden, as you know, has mashed potatoes for brains. And ever since his complete and total public meltdown during the 90-minute CNN debate he engaged in, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago? It seems like just yesterday. He has been on a tour. He's been giving interviews and doing scripted, teleprompted rallies and speeches to try to prove to everybody in the country and around the world that he doesn't have mashed potato for brains, that he's actually perfectly fine. Let me amend that. He's actually not trying to prove it to everyone in the world. He really only has to prove it to a very small handful of people, power brokers in the Democratic Party and the political left and in the media, and major fundraisers for the Democratic Party and for his presidential ticket. They are still not convinced. Every single day, he's got to go out and do another one of these interviews. And every single time the interview is over, he high-fives himself and thinks that he did a great job. There it is. Knocked it out of the park. Slam dunk. I'm at the top of my game. I'm sharp as a tack. And every single person he's trying to convince sort of say, oh, my God, who's going to tell him? Who's going to tell him? And the latest version of this little parade is from Black Entertainment Television. He's trying to shore up support with the black voters in the black community. So let's see how that's going, Joe.
And so it's all about treating people with dignity. And it's about making sure that, look, I mean, for example, look at the heat I'm getting because I named the Secretary of Defense to a black man. I named Ketanji Brown. I mean, because of the people I've named.
Wow. It's going great. You stay out there, Joe. We want to see more of this action from you. Can we break this down for a moment, please?
And so it's all about treating people with dignity.
This is all about treating people with dignity. Let's see how Joe Biden, sharp as a tack on the top of his game, treats people with dignity.
And it's about making sure that, look, I mean, for example, look at the heat I'm getting because I named the Secretary of Defense to a black man.
Now, I believe he's talking about retired four-star general from the United States Army and graduate of West Point, Lloyd Ausin, who is now his Secretary of Defense. That's how I think of the man. You, of course, probably just go by the shorthand nickname that he's got, the Black Man. Serious. He's on Black Entertainment Television. He's tried to celebrate, and this is so typical of Joe Biden. Hey, I appointed a black person to this job. What more do you want from me, you people? Every time he's supposed to show, what did he say? This is how you treat people with dignity. And he can't even remember his name. He calls him the Black Man. And every time he's challenged about his compassion or his virtue or his values, he says, well, look at it. I spent money on this thing. What more do you want? I appointed this person. What more do you want? And there's another lie in here. You always hear, oh, Trump lies, Trump lies. Listen to this lie.
For example, look at the heat I'm getting.
The heat I'm getting. He said, he says mashed potatoes for brains. What he's saying is, look at the heat I got for appointing Lloyd Ausin as Secretary of Defense. Now, I did a news search. I used 2 different search engines, not just the one that starts with G, to try to find criticism of Joe Biden when he appointed Lloyd Ausin as Secretary of Defense. And the only criticism that I saw at the time was from other retired members of the military who had served with him, who were struck by the fact that he focused a little bit more on non-warfare issues, let's say. But none of it had to do with the fact that he was black. There was literally zero heat on Joe Biden for appointing the Black Man. And Ketanji Brown Jackson, I mean, the only heat he got about Ketanji Brown Jackson, again, had nothing to do with her skin color. It had to do with the fact that he said that he was going to nominate someone to the Supreme Court who is a black woman. In other words, the heat was not on the fact that she was a black woman. The heat was on him for prioritizing race and sex over competence and intelligence and the Constitution. But this is how you treat people with dignity, my friends. Oh, one other thing that is missed here. Watch, he was about to say, when he says appointed the black man, he says, look at the heat I got when I appointed a, and then he stopped himself. I wonder what the noun was going to be. I wonder what I appointed a. Any guess on to what his brain was about to lead him to?
It's all about treating people with dignity. And it's about making sure that, look, I mean, for example, look at the heat I'm getting because I named the Secretary of Defense, the black man. I named Katanji.
Wow. This really is. I hope it's a great insight into who he really is. And he's right. It's all about treating people with dignity. I want Lloyd Ausin, the Secretary of Defense, retired 4-star general, graduate of West Point. I want him to get brand new business cards printed out if he had any sense of humor and go around D.C. and say, hi, Lloyd Ausin, the black man. If he's got a Twitter account, he should change that to his description right now. Hey, isn't that Lloyd Ausin? That's right. I'm the black man. What a complete buffoon. That was actually not even the worst of this interview. Here, I'm going to let this play for a while. What's really fascinating about this from Black Entertainment Television, that unlike NBC News and unlike ABC News with those exclusive, not so exclusive interviews at this point, since he's giving it to any outlet he can, they all chopped up and edited those interviews to make him look his absolute best, and they were still disasters. Black Entertainment Television, they were like, screw it. Let's just let the cameras roll. We'll let the world see how this guy is. And, well, we saw. Watch.
It's about why he got involved in the first place. Look, I got out of school, high school, and my state was segregated by law to its great shame in Delaware. And I got involved in the civil rights movement. No great shakes, just sit-ins, and things like that. And the end result of this was all the friends I made. For example, one of the guys who my mom talks about when Barack would call me and saying he wanted to do a background check on me because he wanted to think of me as vice president. I said, I don't want to be vice president. And he said, no, there's only you and two others. I said, Barack, I can help you more as a senator. I really believe that. He said, no. He said, well, damn it, there's only you. And I said, Brock, I don't want to be vice president. He said, well, go home and talk about it. He knows my mom, my dad's dead. So we had a meeting. I was on the train and then going back to Wilmington. And when I got home, we sat in the back porch, called the family together. My son was alive then, my two sons, my daughter. The only outside other than the family members who was there was Ted Kaufman. It was my best friend and was just sitting as stepped in the Senate when I got elected vice president. And so we went around the room. On the porch, what do you want to do? And my wife said, you ought to do it because if you don't, he's going to ask you to be Secretary of State and you'll be away all the time. And then my son, Bo, who was Attorney General, should be sitting there, not me. And I said, Dad, you have an obligation, we'll throw it. And so everybody made their case, and I still didn't want to do it. My mom was sitting against a railing, and over on the porch, there's like a story up from the foot ground. And I said, honey, you haven't said anything. She said, Joey. She said, remember when you were a kid? Remember when I called you when you got out of the race with Brock, and you asked about him? He said, he's really bright. He's an honorable man. He'll make a good president. And I said, yeah, Mom, I remember that. I said, remember when you were a kid and they were desegregating Mayfield, the neighborhood we live, the neighboring neighborhood called Linfield? You were 14 or 15 years old. I told you not to go down there because there were people protesting, but you went down and you got arrested for being on the porch with a black family. And they brought you back home. I said, yeah, I remember that, Mom. She said, remember you had that job as a lifeguard in a country club setting? Do you want to be the only white guy to work in East Side in the projects and the lifeguard? I said, yeah, Ma. So let me get this straight, honey. The first black man in history has a chance to be president. You told him no. That's how it's always been with me in the black community.
I think that performance, that story, and that delivery, and the reaction of the guy interviewing him, I think it speaks for itself. I will just add my one somewhat rhetorical question, although let's not make it rhetorical. You can actually reply in the comments. Here's the question. Does anybody believe that story? Does anybody believe any part of that story, especially the entire premise of the story, which is Joe Biden did not want to be vice president of the United States? Does anybody believe that? I'll look for your answers in the comments section. The most noteworthy part of this entire interview, though, was a little throwaway line that within hours resonated in a enormous way around the world. Watch this.
So I had some medical condition that emerged. If the doctors came to me and said, you got this problem, that problem. But I made a serious mistake in the whole debate. And look, when I originally ran, you may remember it, I said I was going to be a transitional candidate. And I thought that I'd be able to move from this to pass it on to someone else. But I didn't anticipate things getting so divided.
I didn't anticipate things getting so divided. I mean, after I gave that speech in front of Independence Hall where it was drenched in blood red and I was screaming like a madman about my political opponents, 50% of the American populace being right-wing fascists who were ruining our country. I never knew that would actually cause division. When I sicked the judicial system on my political opponent to try to put him in jail and raided his home in the middle of the morning, I had no idea that would actually cause division. When I started arresting people for praying in front of abortion clinics and throwing them in jail for over a decade, I had no idea that would cause division. How was I to know? But again, the real headline is right at the beginning here. You caught it.
So I had some medical condition that emerged. If the doctors came to me and said, you got this problem, that problem. But I made a serious mistake.
He would get out of the race if a medical condition was found and a doctor said, hey, you've got this problem or that problem. Hours after that revelation, it was announced that Joe Biden has, in fact, been diagnosed with COVID-19. I believe this is the third or fourth time that he's had it. He's on booster number 8, too. Thought that'd be a lesson to you. By the way, just on an aside, do you know anybody in your life who has caught COVID in the last 2 years, like for a second time, that didn't also get booster shots? Anyone? Every single person that I know in my life that has had COVID since, the pandemic ended a couple of years ago, every single person I know has booster shots. It's amazing. I'm just saying. So after it was discovered that he had COVID, he boarded a plane, canceled an appearance in Nevada, and went back to Delaware. Not to Washington, D.C., not to the White House, where he lives and where there is a 24/7 medical facility steps away from the president's residence. He didn't go back to the White House. He went home to Delaware. And maybe he's more comfortable at his home in Delaware. Or maybe he likes the fact that when doctors and specialists come to visit him there, they don't have to sign a visitor log that is then public record. But here is Joe Biden walking up the short steps into the belly of Air Force One. This, of course, is the modified approach they use, these stairs, which are easier for him to navigate. Watch how easy they were for him to navigate yesterday. Then, after resting all day on the cross-country trip back to Delaware, he then emerged to walk down those very same short stairs. And let's see, after all that rest, if he had any sort of renewed vigor or strength. Oof. Well, listen, going up and down stairs, especially if it's been raining, they might be wet, they might be slick. That's not always easy to do. You know what's easy to do? Getting into a car, an SUV. Now, that's a breeze. Who has trouble getting into an SUV? I want you to watch this. Now, you have to look through the window of the presidential SUV here to see what's going on. And I'm just going to let you know ahead of time because it might be hard to make out. But what you're seeing on the other side of this vehicle is Joe Biden coming up to the open door and then turning and going, sort of sitting into the car with his butt, with it, backing into the seat, which is, by the way, a weird way to do it. If you ever get into a car, you always lift your leg up, right? And you step into the car leading with your leg. No, not our Joe. He turns his entire body around and then he tries to back into the seat. But watch what happens when he tries to do that.
When he got down there at the base of the stairs there, he was asked questions by reporters. He told them, "I am doing well." He gave them a thumbs up. He is now going to be isolating at his beach house. And we did note he wasn't wearing a mask there.
Oh, forgive me. I totally missaw this video earlier today when I saw it, but now that I'm watching it a second time, he's not trying to back in. He actually is putting his head is in, and he's trying to then lift himself into the SUV, and he can't do it. But I apologize. It's not rear end first. It's actually head first. He's holding on to the handle by the door, and I guess he's got his other hand on the seat of the car. And let's start it from the beginning again so you can see, because he approaches. That's him right there with a hat on, okay? You just saw him descend the stairs of Air Force One. There's the hat right there in the window. See that? I'm highlighting it. All right, now watch him try to inch his way into the car.
He got down there at the base of the stairs there. He was asked questions by reporters. He told them, "I am doing well." He gave them a thumbs up. He is now going to be isolating at his beach house. And we did note he wasn't wearing a mask there when he came down the stairs. But it does appear once he gets in the car that he puts that mask on.
Puts the mask on. It appears that he might be getting a little help just getting into the car there. Hard to make out through the rain what exactly is going on there. But it does look like certainly the president's feeling the effects of early in the stages of COVID, and many of us have been there. So we do wish him a speedy recovery. John Carl, you're reporting earlier on World News Tonight, getting some pickup tonight across several news.
I'm sorry. If you've had COVID, most of us have by now. Was it so debilitating that you couldn't get into a car? And you heard conversation there about masks. Not once was he seen with a mask in any public setting. I remember Donald Trump was destroyed for refusing to wear a mask. I'm glad he didn't wear a mask on multiple occasions because it is a sign of weakness. You put a mask on this guy who's already the sign of weakness, and he just gets, the imagery is like he's a plate of Jell-O. Let's face it. So I understand why they didn't want to have a mask, but hypocrisy, anyone? This is the political movement that called you worse than, Satan if you didn't wear a mask while you were walking alone on the other side of the sidewalk, and then Karen would come screaming at you. Happened to me many times. One other aspect of this, remember yesterday's video of Joe Biden in Nevada entering a grocery store and then going right to that little girl and sniffing her face off? Remember? And there was another video of him visiting a Mexican restaurant and leaning over people's food while they were eating and sort of slobbering his greetings to them because the man has no respect for personal space. Well, in both of those instances, every single person that he encountered, they were exposed to his virus. What a guy. And then finally, this morning on Good Morning America, George Stephanopoulos and Jonathan Karl on a breaking update on the long knives out for Joe Biden. I think you'll get a kick out of this if you're a regular viewer of this program.
And John, we have to begin with President Biden. Boy, the walls are closing in on him. Oh, they sure are, George. As we first reported here on ABC, Senator Chuck Schumer over the weekend traveled to Rehoboth, Delaware, visited one-on-one with President Biden, and very directly, very bluntly told him that it would be bad for him and bad for Democrats if he stayed in the race, urged him to get out of the race. It is a message that I am told has also been delivered by Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader in the House, and also by Nancy Pelosi. So you have essentially the entire elected leadership of the Democratic Party telling him to get out. And in response to all of this, Biden, the White House has said, put out a statement in response to each one of those stories. The president told both leaders he is the nominee of the party. He plans to win, and he looks forward to working with them on an agenda for next year. But George, I just don't see how it is tenable for Joe Biden to continue as the Democratic nominee, president and Democratic nominee in 2024.
All right, a couple of things about this, mostly just to let you know that the story does continue to grow and have legs. Axios reporting also this morning that Democrat insiders, high-ranking insiders in the party and in the White House expect President Biden to make his announcement that he will no longer be on the ticket by this weekend, if not today. I think to steal Donald Trump's thunder, he will make that announcement today. But two things to note. First, notice how George and John Carl are like, oh, yeah, this is so sad. I mean, they're it's like somebody shot their puppy. It's like Christy Noem's been around the puppy mill there in their backyard. Because why are they so sad? Why are they so upset? I thought that they were just straight newsmen reporting the news. Why would it make you sad? Unless he's your guy, unless you're on his team, and then it makes you sad.
We have to begin with President Biden. Boy, the walls are closing in on him.
Yeah.
Oh, they sure are, George.
Wow.
As we first reported here on ABC.
Yeah, and then there's that. Really, John? As we first reported here on ABC, and it's true, Jonathan Karl did report late in the afternoon yesterday that Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, had visited Joe Biden at his home in Delaware and told him to get off the ticket. It's true, Jonathan Karl did report that. But the first reporting, was that the first reporting, Jonathan Karl? Is that how you put it?
Oh, they sure are, George. As we first reported here on ABC.
Well, if you're a viewer of this program, you learned of this at 12:05 yesterday, hours before Jonathan Karl reported it. And by the way, I gave full credit to the crew over at the Ruthless podcast. They have great sources in the Senate. They know people who are staffers of Chuck Schumer's, et cetera, and they reported it on the Ruthless podcast. I reported it to you, and then Jonathan Karl, hours after the fact, as first reported here on ABC News. God, they are worse than biased, and they're worse than hacks. They're absolutely irrelevant at this point. I'm thinking the only time you ever see these guys is when we highlight how bad they are. And that's a good thing. We're glad to have you in our audience. And I bet you're glad to be here.